Sports Talk Chicago. Cover Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's covered the Bulls for 30-plus years. Today serves as the Bulls Insider, NBC Sports Chicago. Please welcome Casey Johnson to the program. Casey, it's great to have you on. How are you?
What's going on, John? How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. What's going on with the Bulls right now?
It's not good. We're just having this conversation at our shop over at NBC Sports Chicago. What's funny is if this season had kind of flipped and, that hot start was happening now and you're, ascending to the 6th seed and a 45, 46 win season, fans would be going crazy because of how bad this team's been the last 5 years. But, the fact that it started out and raised expectations, they were leading the East for as long as they did. And now, not only are they losing, to me, these losses are fairly non-competitive. It's leaving, a sour taste in a lot of fans' mouth. And really, it's hard to analyze, what's real. Was that other stuff real, or was this stuff real? I know that they haven't been whole for a lot of this season. And I know now with Lonzo being rolled out for the rest of the playoffs, that's a significant loss. But your main three players are Nikola Vucevic, DeMar DeRozan, and Zach LaVine, and they still are out there. LaVine, obviously, albeit not at quite 100% with that knee situation, but it's troubling. You'd like to think that they can maybe find a switch for the playoffs, because this is an important experience for the franchise, given where it's been since 2017. But right now, you don't have a lot to hang your hat on in terms of how they're playing at both ends, really.
So what's been hurting them in all these high-stakes games? Why did they lose the big games but win the easier ones?
Well, Billy Donovan, I thought, had a really good point last night. He's been kind of hammering this theme about understanding what it takes to, compete at the level that these elite teams compete at. And he talked about winning the margins. And what he means by that is, the intensity and competitiveness that you need to bring to every possession in terms of fighting over every screen, diving for every loose ball, boxing out on every time, getting back on defense every time, shot fake discipline, game plan, following the game plan discipline, et cetera. And it's just like the level of specificity and intensity you need to bring to every one of those elements. That's what the margins means. And that's what he says the good teams do. They win the margins. And in the cases of the recent games, the teams like the Celtics and the Bucks, they're not only winning the margins, they're dominating the margins. And that's why it's a blowout loss. So, the Bulls obviously have talent. I mentioned those three players. Those are three really, really good basketball players. But in order to win at the level that these elite teams are winning, you need to win the margins. And right now the Bulls are not doing that.
What do you expect for them come playoff time if they can't beat these winning teams?
My expectations are incredibly low. At this point, I think, would a sweep surprise me? No. If they win one game, I can see that happening. This maybe would answer your question better. Like if they won 2 or more games in a series, I'd be surprised. That's just the level of play that I'm witnessing right now. And it's disappointing because, as I said earlier, that, they raised expectations with their own style of play and their own, success earlier in the season. And again, it's a very hard season to judge because you want to give them the benefit of the doubt that if they had stayed whole, that level of play could have continued. But as the season has progressed, a light's been kind of shined on, some areas of deficiency and that either need to be addressed with better play or some personnel moves this offseason.
How do you evaluate this season? If they go into the playoffs and get swept or lose a couple of games, but they still put up this about 500 record and made it, what do you say it is? A success, or what is it?
Yeah, I still would probably pause for a broader perspective and just talk about, as we know, when this regime took over, the Bulls had not only had trouble winning, but they had kind of faded from relevancy in the league. They weren't drawing as well as they're typically drawing. They weren't really considered a desirable franchise. The league-wide perception had dropped off. So in that sense, they are relevant again. Their attendance is back, near the top of the league, if not at the top of the league. they've obviously acquired high-level players, big-name players, and it's a managerial regime that engenders respect. They're well connected. They have relationships throughout the league, so all that stuff remains. And you do need to at least acknowledge it is their first postseason appearance since 2017. So that's all on the plus side. But as I said before, what's making this season difficult to judge is just, it's not only that they're losing, it's that they're non-competitive losses. And so you need to see how the playoffs play out before I can fully answer that question. If they get swept and it's 4 blowout losses, you gotta maybe dial down the perspective and say, okay, this was all fool's gold earlier in the season. Again, without Lonzo, that adds one caveat. But as you know, I've been doing this a long time, and this has been one of the more puzzling seasons for me to figure out because of just the disparity between what you saw earlier in the season and what you're seeing now.
AC Johnson here on Sports Talk Chicago. Who's been the bigger surprise of the season, though? Something positive?
I would go with Lonzo Ball, and I know we only saw him for 35 games, but I was talking about this with a scout that I know a couple of days ago, that he's one of those players you probably appreciate on a limited level when you see him once or twice a year in person, a handful of times on League Pass. But when you see him every night, well, I shouldn't say every night because he only appeared in 35 games, but when you see him over an extended period of time, you recognize his value, and really at both ends. I think there's this misperception that, he's when his absence has really impacted the Bulls defense, and that's legitimate and significant. But offensively, he is really critical to a team because and all credit goes to him. He's developed into not just a knockdown shooter. I would call him borderline elite. I mean, he was shooting over 42% from 3-point range on over 7 attempts a game. That's significant volume, very impressive percentage. And, beyond his shooting ability, his ability to push pace, to serve as a connecting piece, to make full court passes that nobody else really even can see. He's just so crucial to how your team wants to play offensively, both in the half court and in transition. So I would say he's probably surprised me the most. I think earlier this season you asked me that, and my answer was DeMar DeRozan, just because I did not expect a guy to be having a all-NBA level season in year 13. But he's certainly going to be in that conversation for all-NBA still. But I think he's kind of tailed off a little bit down the stretch here. So I would probably give the nod to Lonzo Ball.
What's made DeRozan so good here?
I think it's a combination of things. He's just reached a place in his career where he's really comfortable in his own skin. It's the experience that he's gained, the knowledge that he's gained, the evolution of his game, moving into a playmaker role as well. He's always been a guy that's been able to get to his spots and been elite in mid-range. And he's also always been a very strong clutch performer. But his ability to do those things and, be in a place where it's where he chose to go. He's very comfortable here. His skill set meshes very well with Zach LaVine, even though there were question marks about that fit. So I think it's just a confluence of factors. But the biggest thing is just if you deal with him or talk to him and you hear teammates talk about this, he's just got this calming presence. And I think it's just a guy that's really reached this point of his career and he's just found comfort and peace with his own game and his own standing in the game. And I think he's putting all that experience to practice on the court.
Did you expect him and Zach LaVine to work as well as they have? I'm not sure maybe to this level, but I was definitely not in the camp that was questioning the fit because I really felt like the Bulls were in a position last offseason when they acquired DeRozan that they simply just needed to upgrade their talent base. And there's no question that DeMar DeRozan is an extremely talented player. So I focused less on, can they coexist together, and just more like, man, the Bulls got a great player. That can only be a positive. I will say, I've been a pretty staunch LaVine defender for those who call him a selfish player. So I did see, him fitting in that sense because
he is a very willing passer. Both he and DeMar are both elite scorers, but they're also willing to, move the ball if they're getting double teamed. So I was optimistic that they would play well together. I don't think anybody would have envisioned that they would play this well together. And LaVine's end to his season is kind of hard to judge too, because he's not right. And, it's very open and transparent about that situation. He's probably going to need some sort of procedure with his knee this offseason, although that's not, scheduled or confirmed yet, but it just certainly seems like it's trending that way. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, like, as disappointing as the end of the season's been, you still have that as a base. You still have those, well, assuming that Zach is back, he is an unrestricted free agent, but you still have that as a base moving forward if Zach is indeed, inking here this offseason.
What's the likelihood that the Bulls extend him?
Well, I think from the Bulls' perspective, it's a no-brainer. I mean, you've kind of put yourself in this situation where that's what you're kind of building towards. He's part of your core. You've identified that. You do have the ability to pay him more than any other team, and also for longer if you choose that route. There is a trend in today's NBA for stars to take shorter deals to hit free agency faster. So I'm not saying Zach will agree to a 5-year deal, but the Bulls can put that on the table if that's something they want to do. I've all along thought, he likes living in Chicago. He likes representing the Bulls. He respects Billy Donovan. He loves the management regime. He likes playing with DeMar. So I think from a Bulls perspective, it's a no-brainer. Every indication I've gotten from Zach is that he is happy here. But I always say about free agency, you never, it can take unexpected twists and turns. You have to see how it plays out. But I all along have expected Zach to be here long term.
What about the core aspect? Like, for example, DeMar DeRozan's going to be under contract for 2 more years. Vucevic is kind of nearing the end of it as well. Do you think Zach LaVine could be worried about that, knowing that the core could kind of be broken up in a couple of years, and the fact that this collapse happened this year?
It's a valid question, and that's why I say it's not a done deal. I mean, you can't say, oh yeah, he's definitely going to be back. I mean, I expect him to be back, but what I would say to that is, he can choose the length of security that he wants here, because he has that power as the unrestricted free agent. And then what I would also say is, you're right in the sense that DeRozan's up in 2 years and Vucevic is up in 1 year, but all I've heard from LaVine is his praise for this management team. And so he would have to then be putting his trust in them to either figure out a way to, turn those expiring deals into assets or re-sign them on the right terms, et cetera, et cetera. He has to have belief in their ability to construct a winning roster around him. That's all I've heard from him to this point. But we'll see how it plays out this offseason.
What other needs should the Bulls address this year in the offseason?
Yeah, that's a good question because, in theory, this Vucevic acquisition, seemed like it was the right move and fit, but there are some question marks being raised about it. I mean, it does seem like they suffer at times for rim protection. And, Vucevic is such a skilled player, but, the Bulls are undersized with rim protection in terms of traditional rim protection. And then also his inability or his struggles to be elite in pick and roll were offset by Ball and Caruso's, elite point of attack defense early in the season. But as that's faded away, Vucevic's defensive shortcomings have been exposed a little bit further. So I would, if you do make a significant move, I would think that he, especially because he's only got 1 year left on his deal, would be the logical place to look or start. But as far as needs, I mean, they definitely still need more shooting, and they definitely need more rim protection.
Do you think if Vucevic was a better rim protector, would things be different as far as how the season went?
I mean, I don't want to put it all on him because I think, like I said, the roster construction, you can see the vision that they had is that I thought Vucevic was actually having a very good season defensively early in the season because he is a responsible team defender and he's an elite defensive rebounder. So Ball and Caruso's presence to me kind of hid his weaknesses. And as those guys have fallen off in terms of absences, and then Caruso isn't quite making the same impact because he's playing through a back issue, the Bulls defense in general has struggled, and Vucevic is a significant part of that. But, Vucevic has just not had as good of a season as he's had in the past couple of years. I mean, he's struggled to shoot the ball from three. He's had nights where he's, lost his individual matchup. I mean, Brook Lopez the other night, dominated that matchup. So, he's such a skilled player. You can see why he fits, and you can see why Arturas, who I want to make clear, I'm not saying that Vooch is Jokic light, because he's not. Nobody's like Jokic, but you can see, I mean, he came from Denver where he saw Jokic, be the big man where you could run offense through him and serve as a connecting piece. And Vucevic has that skill set, and he also is, or has been, an elite shooter at times, but he's dropped off a little bit this year. So, he's been the first to admit that he's struggled at times this year, and they have a chance to try to get it right in the playoffs.
Let me ask you this. Who specifically would you like to see the Bulls go after or bring in to help out the team?
Well, I don't know if these people are available, but I mean, if you're talking about, laundry list of perfect fits, I mean, DeAndre Ayton, I don't see how Phoenix lets that guy go, particularly if they win a championship. But, he didn't reach an extension last summer, and that would be like the perfect fit. You've got a elite rim protector who's, just such a solid two-way player. That would be kind of the pie in the sky list. As for terms of guys that are gettable or potentially gettable, you're starting to hear, issues in Utah, and they certainly have dropped off this season. Does that make Rudy Gobert available? I mean, he's got a cumbersome contract in terms of just how long it lasts and how lucrative it is, but you can't get much more elite rim protection than that. So, I've always told you, John, I'm not a good GM, but that's their pay grade. But if you're talking about fits, I mean, those two guys would be certainly upgrades in terms of rim protection.
AC Johnson, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. You're a play-by-play announcer too. Maybe you're not a GM, but you are a play-by-play announcer. Why don't you tell me about how that all came up?
Well, yeah, it's a little dated at this point because it was New Year's Eve, but yeah. So Adam Amin, right before tip-off in Indiana, afternoon game, had a little issue with his testing. Teams were getting tested more regularly then, and as a broadcaster, he's tested, or what at that point was getting tested, I believe, daily. I don't want to speak for Adam, but that was my understanding. And as an independent reporter, who also works for NBC Sports Chicago, I was not getting tested daily. So he had a little issue with his testing and was not able to start the broadcast. What makes the story even crazier is the very supremely talented broadcaster, Robbie Hummel, was also making his NBA television debut. He had done a couple games on radio with Chuck Swirsky, and obviously his lights out on the college basketball broadcasting scene, but had never called an NBA game on TV before. So our producer got in our ear and informed us about Adam's situation. It was only a handful of minutes before tip-off, and for some ridiculous reason, I said, "I'll do the play-by-play." I think I did it partly because I wanted to free Robbie up to kind of be in his role that he's comfortable in, even though I had only met Robbie very briefly to that point. In fact, before we went to air, he actually asked me right before tip-off, like as the producer was counting us down, is it Casey or KC? Because he didn't even know what my name was. So there's the familiarity that he and I were working on. But I've equated it to driving through a rainstorm. I gripped the steering wheel and did not look anywhere but straight ahead. I did not check my rear view mirror. I did not check my side mirrors. I grabbed the steering wheel tight, and I ended up doing a radio call for a television broadcast. But it was a hell of an experience. I had a blast doing it, and I think that opportunity will never happen again because it was a perfect storm of events. But if it did, I think I'd slow down and enjoy it a little bit more. I definitely enjoyed it after the fact, but during it, I was just focused on the experience itself. And Robbie made it a lot easier because he's so good at what he does. And the last thing I'll say is I am proud that I did not get one name wrong, and that involved some 10-day and hardship signings on the Pacers that I had previously never heard of. So at least I got my names right. So there you go.
Have you practiced since then, or not really going to stick to writing?
Yeah. Yeah. But I'll do right into my short little in-game hits with Adam and Stacy on our network. So that's definitely my speed. So there you go.
Casey, before we finish up today, last question. Who's your favorite Bull you've ever covered?
I don't want to name just one because there's been so many great ones. I think this is pretty well documented, but I've always felt a very strong connection to Jamal Crawford just because, you know, I had him as a rookie, and he's so accessible and great with the media, which you're now seeing as he's moving into a media career. And, you know, I always say, like, people have asked me, like, are you friends with the players? And the answer is ultimately no, because your job is to be objective. But just in any walk of life, you meet people and you just feel a connection with them regardless of what your job is or what have you. And Jamal is just someone that, you know, when I met him, he and I just like clicked on like a human level for some reason. And we've stayed in touch throughout the years. You know, he's somebody that if I texted or called right now, he'd get back to me right away. Just a great guy. And so, I mean, but there are many people, you know, I've said Joakim Noah is probably my favorite athlete to cover because of, you know, his emotion and his intensity and his honesty and his wearing his feelings on his sleeve, and he very smart, very intelligent, very worldly. So, but I could name 10 players, but Joakim was probably my favorite athlete to cover, but Jamal is just someone I probably connected with, you know, just on the human level more closely than anybody.
Casey, thank you so much for joining me. Always appreciate the time. Best wishes for this playoff run, I guess. I hope they could win a couple of games, but looking forward to the next time we chat too.
All right, John. Always good to talk to you, man.